In the spring of 2019, a group of 6 old-school cavers climbed down the jagged pothole leading to Virginia's Cyclops Cave. The rough and tumble group planned to stay overnight in Cyclops Cave's extensive 7-mile tunnel system. They entered expecting to see beautiful cave formations, but what they saw shocked them. The 6 cavers turned around just hours into their journey, but only one man made it out on his own. What happened to the other 5 cavers? Find out as we relive the Cyclops Cave rescue. Before we dive into the video, I want to take a moment to thank all of you who have subscribed to this channel. Our subscriber rate has grown from 8% to 13%, which is truly amazing. If you're new here, simply click the subscribe button, like this video, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest uploads. Now let's get into the video. On Friday evening, the band of 6 adventurers packed their trucks with some old work clothes, worn and faded hoodies, pants, boots, some helmets and light sources, and some sleeping gear. The youngest in the group was 22, while the others ranged from 34 to 59. The older cavers were used to toughing it out and exploring on their own. They grew up without the internet to learn how to cave properly, and they felt ready to endure what lay in wait below ground. Their tires ripped up the dirt roads leading into the Virginia wilderness as the sun began to set behind the forest trees. After parking near a dirt road, the men climbed up a steep hill lined with rocks, small trees, and undergrowth. They reached a craggy, sharp pothole with moss-covered rocks that snaked down into the darkness, marking the entrance of Cyclops Cave. At 7 p.m., the 6 men carefully gripped the dirt and rocks at the edge of the deep drop. Without ropes, they had to rely on their own calloused hands to prevent falling to their death. And one by one, they left the light behind and entered the cave. Cyclops Cave is located at the edge of Virginia's Karst Range in an area called Sinkhole Valley in Russell County. It's a wild cave that's had almost no alterations by human hands. The only additions are some anchors for ropes. Novice cavers are advised to stay away from Cyclops because it contains almost every hazard imaginable. The group of 6 would-be cavers immediately met the first challenge of Cyclops as they struggled to descend the first section of the cave. They thought there would be a simple climb down, but there are actually 8 different pitches that each extend 20 to 50 feet down. To make matters worse, the horizontal passages connecting these climbs were extremely tight and coated in thick mud. The men dug and crawled their way through the cave, barely fitting at some points, and each muddy section made the next climb even harder as they struggled to keep their grip without the proper gear. Beyond this hellish section, they entered the main passage of the cave, which has a 40-foot-tall, rounded roof with a feature known as the fountain, which is a thin waterfall made from droplets of water to form stalagmites below. The sharp, slab-like rocks from the entrance turn into smooth dripstone near a small waterfall by the main passage. Upstream, the cave connects to a permanently flooded sump. Only experienced divers should ever attempt to explore beyond this point. In some caves, sumps have crystal clear water, allowing cavers to see the junction. Sometimes these waters tempt cavers to free dive without any scuba gear. No goggles, fins, or air to breathe. And sometimes they make it. But in the murky water of Cyclops, a free dive would have been a death sentence. The 6 men had no diving gear, so there was no way they could try this portion and live to tell the tale. In the opposite direction, the cavers followed along the underground river pathway. They crouched and crawled, trying to avoid the water through this strange passage which has multiple sections denoting the water height over the years. In this section, even the stalactites on the ceiling are caked in mud. As they explored, they started to feel drops of water trickle down from above. They chalked it up to being lower than the sump they saw earlier, and moved forward to Prometheus Junction. Then they reached another vertical hole. This borehole was even harder than before, since they had the horrible idea to enter the cave at night, after they were already tired from the day. They planned to camp, so they thought their sleepiness wouldn't matter. But cavers should camp before they use all their energy. That way, they always have some left in reserve in case of emergencies. At this point, the water was starting to soak into their clothes as they struggled down. They even heard the flow of water ahead as they entered a passage with yellowed ceilings and bluish-green shelves formed by slow drops of water from above. Only this time, the water was almost pouring down the mineral-covered rock. From there, they reached a connection to Rapture River, a roughly 40-foot-high canyon where the river flows rapidly at the bottom. This is where they made their next major mistake. The pitch down to the riverbed is permanently rigged with a rope for cavers to descend, but the rope hangs dangerously close to the waterfall. The water flowing into Rapture River looked calm along the upper portion, but over the ledge, the water was raging. Climbing down this section would be incredibly dangerous even in low water, but the water inside Cyclops Cave was getting worse. The cavers had no way of knowing, but Rapture River was more than 20 feet higher than normal that day, and it was still rising. Because of the cave's length, its water, and its proximity to unique habitats along the Clinch River, researchers estimate Cyclops Cave could be home to unique invertebrate species and other amazing finds like horn coral fossils. Further down the cave, the 6 cavers expected to see dripstone pools, tall white stalactites, shelves of thin, almost transparent rock, and layers of almost alien formations. But they would never reach those wonderful sights. One of the cavers tried descending the rope as the water soaked his clothes. As he got down, he squinted through the mist spraying his face, but he couldn't find the passage. He slowly climbed back up, slipping at one point, but he managed to hold on with brute strength. When he neared the top, his fellow cavers bent down to pull him onto the ledge. He was soaked, and the way forward was blocked. They realized the water must be too high, so they scrapped their plans for camping and turned around. As they backtracked, the water continued to get worse as, unbeknownst to them, a rainstorm had started above ground. As they reached the narrow tubes near the entrance, they were shocked to find water pouring from the tunnels. Their exit was completely flooded. For nearly 2 days, the group sat below ground as the water stole all the warmth from their bones as it continued to pour into the cave, seemingly from every direction. They had ignored one of caving's most basic rules. They didn't tell anyone where they were going. To make matters worse, the mud was draining their heat even faster. Even past the entrance, most of Cyclops is very muddy. New cavers often think mud is just a nuisance. They might even enjoy muddy caves. But over time, mud gets very cold, and it can be deadly because it has high thermal mass. That means mud can store a lot of energy, which is why mud walls are used in construction in some countries. They absorb the energy of the sun and they release it later, instead of trapping warm air like insulation. But that property of mud can be a double-edged sword. When mud is cold, it's even harder to warm up. The mud wove its way into every fiber of their clothing, preventing it from trapping their body heat. Instead, all of their warmth was sucked into the thick, wet mud that encased them and felt as cold as snow. If the cavers were outside in mild conditions, the mud would eventually reach the same temperature as their bodies, but in the cool, nearly freezing air of the cave, their bodies were constantly radiating warmth while the cave air continuously cooled it. It was a fight they would eventually lose. No human alive has enough energy in their body to warm a 7-mile-long cave. Over time, they would lose so much energy they would die, and their corpses would become as cold as the mud and chilly winds of the cave. After nearly 2 days trapped underground, the rain finally halted, but by then, many of the cavers were too weak from their battle against the cold. They couldn't climb out. As if their situation wasn't dire enough, they were also out of food and water. They had no cell phone reception and no chance of survival. When all seemed lost, The younger member of the group, the 22-year-old, rallied his strength and pushed past his limits as he dug through the muddy death traps once again. His weary friends cheered him on as his boots disappeared in the long tunnels. But somehow, at 2 a.m. on Sunday, the unnamed man reached the last pitch. He pushed past the pain and wedged his body against the wall to catch his breath as he slowly climbed up and exited Cyclops Cave. He stumbled down the path and called for help. He reached emergency coordinator Jeff Powers. Luckily, even though his group seemingly knew nothing about caving, he was smart enough to assess the physical condition of the other cavers before he left. He gave detailed information to the dispatch, including info on the physical characteristics of the cavers, any medical problems they may have had in the past or present, and where they were trapped. This information would be vital to the rescuers, and it sped up the planning stage. Unfortunately, the county emergency response crew lacked cave rescue gear, so the Virginia Department of Emergency Management sent their own search and rescue coordinator to help plan the rescue. The Blacksburg Volunteer Rescue Squad sent 23 members along with their cave rescue trailer to get the project started. Then, the Black Diamond Search and Rescue Coordinator Michael Maggard also drove to the Virginia wilderness to help with the rescue. The quickly growing rescue team had to figure out how to approach this situation. The rocky and the steep hill outside of the cave was a problem. They had to haul all their gear up the hill, which could wear them out. To save energy, they spent the next 8 hours planning every detail of the rescue using detailed maps of the cave. At 10:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, the team began hauling their gear up the hill to the entrance of Cyclops Cave. And, just as they started their hike, cavers from Tennessee and North Carolina also arrived to lend their aid. The rescuers knew there were no ropes outside the cave, so they had to rig their own entry ropes to keep themselves and the trapped cavers safe. Crews tied multiple ropes around a small tree. In the wet mud, the weight of only a few people could pull the tree to the ground, so they connected other ropes to even more trees to create a chain that formed a secure anchor for their ropes. Next, they added a pulley system. The pulley's main rope was connected straight to a nearby tree parallel to the ground, and rescuers used a large woven nylon anchor for added support. That's the same material seatbelts are made from. They tied the strap around another tree and secured it to the pulley using a locking clip so that the pulley had multiple points of failure. If one support broke, the pulley wouldn't fall down the hole. Rescuers attached a bucket to the pulley to bring the trapped cavers out of the hole. A rescuer was scheduled to climb up the exit as the bucket rose to keep watch and prevent anything from going wrong. But since they were all on the same rope system, their added weight could snap the tree or break one of the clips. Multiple other rescuers held the ropes during ascents and descents for even more security. Rescuers used single-rope climbing techniques to enter the cave while lugging multiple metal clips, first aid packs, a spool of wire for communications, a rescue backpack which could house the basket stretcher or other supplies like solid waste removal bags, and extra light sources. As the first rescuers began the tight climb down into Cyclops Cave, an angry property owner arrived at the rescue site. It turned out the cave was on private property, and the cavers didn't have permission to be there. Rescuers had to direct the property owner away from the operation to prevent interference as they tried to calm him down. He couldn't stop the rescue, but he could make life hell for the cavers, even if they managed to make it out alive. Trespassing and other charges could be brought against the cavers, which could lead to financial ruin, family and relationship problems, and even infamy among the caving community. As the days slowly passed by, the trapped cavers were losing hope as they thought of all the ways they might die. Rescuers pushed through the tight chambers until they reached a block. The mud had dried in some areas, leaving the passage totally impassable. The team inside the cave called for power tools to dig through the passages faster. The tools came in handy again when they reached even tighter passageways. These constricted tunnels would be too tight for the rescue bucket to pass through, so they had to drill and chip away at the rock, permanently changing the difficulty of the route. Rescuers were scheduled to connect with the cavers shortly after they passed through the difficult entryway. The trapped cavers were supposed to be on the right, on the other side, near the chilling breeze of the underground river. The passage was quiet as the rescuers approached. The rescuers didn't know what to expect. After all, the cavers weren't dressed properly, and they had likely ran out of food and water. Rescuer Eric Stanley was with the first group as they pressed through the 300-foot entrance of the cave. And as they pushed through the last tunnel into the main cave chamber, he saw the trapped cavers. They were all alive. The 5 trapped men were relieved and happy to see rescuers. Their gloom turned to joy as other rescuers rigged hauled lines to get them up the various cliffs of Cyclops Cave. The cavers were too tired, with practically no rest, and they were all suffering from hypothermia caused by their mud-drenched clothes. The first rescue team gave the cavers blankets and water, and they stayed with them to assess their condition while the other rescuers finished preparing for the extraction. The team helped the first caver into the rescue basket and placed a guard strap across his sternum to prevent rocks from scraping against his flesh as they hoisted the bucket through the narrow tunnels. At the top, rescuers needed help to get up the muddy slope, so other rescuers extended hands and pulled them up the slope to stay with the first basket while others went down. As they were extracting the first casualty, the condition of one of the other cavers started to worsen. They quickly got him out of the cave next, and a full team stayed with the stretcher as they dragged it across the ground. A spotter called out possible hazards like rocks or holes so that the team could react ahead of time, lifting the canoe or changing directions to avoid collision. The bucket was also connected via another strong nylon cable to multiple other rescuers who walked behind the stretcher. That way, even if all hands failed, the casualty wouldn't go far. An ATV hauled the caver on its short flatbed, while others walked alongside the basket for extra security. They drove down yet another hill onto the plains by the road, and loaded the second caver onto a med-flight helicopter to be treated for hypothermia. After an agonizing 47-hour wait inside Cyclops Cave, the rest of the trapped cavers were slowly brought to safety above ground. One caver was capable of walking once he made it out, and he spoke with news crews telling them the Lord watched over them. Nearby, another caver was loaded into an awaiting ambulance for treatment. Although the Cyclops Cave rescue was challenging with its numerous tight twists and turns, the rescuers drew the perfect plans for the haul lines, and everything worked according to plan. It took around an hour for the demobilization process to wrap up, completing the 16-hour rescue operation at Cyclops Cave. Even though the cave is difficult to explore, in the years that followed, more unregistered cavers have squeezed into Cyclops Cave, breaking formations and rigging, and even spraying graffiti on delicate limestone walls. Since then, the Southern Cave Conservancy has purchased the land, gated the entrance, and opened Cyclops Cave to all splunkers who obtain free permits. Who knows? Maybe some of the men who were rescued that day now comprise the Cyclops Cave Preserve family to ensure that the cave is safe for explorers, sport cavers, and scientific researchers alike. Are you bold enough to venture into the muddied crawl of Cyclops Cave? Let us know in the comments section below. Hit the like button if you're glad that the cavers made it out alive, and subscribe to see more incredible cave rescue stories.